Hello and welcome to Media MD, your fortnightly Doof Network dose of media that you have somehow missed. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are back this very special Boxing Day to talk about the Christmas film from 2015, The Night Before.
Yeah. As is tradition, which is obviously very important on Christmas, why don't you start us off with the plot summary?
Yes, so The Night Before is a story about Tracy Morgan, who plays Santa, and he's telling a story to all his little elves. And
slash angels?
Slash an angel.
Do we want to get into
his
that
son,
right now?
Right? Like, we'll get to that later. I have stuff to say about that. So he's telling this story to his elves, and this story is about three friends. One who is played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, one who is played by Seth Rogen, and one who is played by Anthony Mackie. Sorry, I should say Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character is, I've forgotten his name, like Ethan, I think? Something like that. Isaac is Seth Rogen's character, and Anthony Mackie's character is Chris Robinson, something like that.
Yeah, Chris B or something, yeah.
Yes, so Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, his parents, the story actually starts with a little prologue about his parents dying. They both die in, I think, a car crash or something like that, and he is left an orphan on Christmas. When he's not a child, I was actually expecting him to be a child, but he's not. He's older than that.
Yeah, well, he's like in high school. Like, I got the impression it's meant to be like 16, 17.
Yes. Yeah, I guess that's a child. But whenever I hear like the word orphan, for some reason I think of like Oliver Twist level, like, 10 years old.
8 to 10 year old, yeah.
So I was a bit surprised by how much older he is. Anyway, so he's got no family for Christmas. It's very sad. And so Isaac and Chris come over and hang out with him for Christmas. And they start this tradition of spending time together for Christmas because they didn't really want to spend time with their families. On this first Christmas, they hang out, they go drinking, they set all kinds of traditions that they're going to keep for 13 years, and none more important than finding out about a party called the Nutcracker Ball that that is built up as this kind of mysteriously epic Christmas party that they seemingly can't find for 13 years.
Yeah. And so they sort of go through their tradition every year, like on Christmas Eve, while also trying to track down tickets to the Nutcracker Ball.
Yes, and the main part of our movie takes place on the 13th night of this tradition. They've kind of decided that it's time for it to end because Anthony Mackie is now a super famous basketballer, and Isaac has a family now, and it's kind of, they've outgrown this tradition a bit. And so they do their tradition for one last time, but this time Ethan has managed to snag tickets to this Nutcracker Ball, and so they finally get to experience it. And they basically go on a series of misadventures on their way to this mythical party, which they eventually get to, and it imparts some nice Christmas wisdom on them. And then they have a good time. They make new traditions, etc. It's very Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, I think this movie does a particularly good job of handling Christmas themes, because there's not really a way to do a Christmas story without it being fairly ham-fisted.
Yes.
And I think this movie just kind of embraces that and works it into the comedy in a good way. So it's kind of like, you know exactly where all of this is heading fairly early on, and it's just delivered in a way that you kind of like, oh, that was nice.
Yeah, I think it's hard to watch a Christmas movie and not come away with the criticism, well, that was a bit formulaic, right? Like, I don't know of a Christmas movie that isn't formulaic to some extent. And The Night Before is no exception, but it does play with the formula in some fun ways, right? So, for example, this whole prologue that I mentioned at the start about, his parents dying and finding out about the Nutcracker Ball, this is all delivered in rhyme. And it goes for 3 minutes. I was like, oh shit, is this whole movie in rhyme for a second? And there's some other bits where they'll play with like Christmassy sound effects and lighting and stuff and tie it into this kind of, I guess the word is magical realism, right? And this is something that I really liked about the movie, is it had this kind of magical realism vibe that I really found myself enjoying.
I agree. Like, they set up Mr. Green, who was their pot dealer, early on, as you kind of can't tell if he's just a wise stoner or actually a bit more magical. Like the way there's a bit, and I really enjoyed this sort of watching it again, having seen it recently, where it's like, he's like, tell Isaac I look forward to seeing him in a few hours.
Yes.
And you just sort of almost write it off as like, oh, that was weird. And then sure enough, they lose the plot and they have to go find Mr. Green again a couple of hours later, and Isaac's the one who goes in. And he does the whole, he gives them the weed of Christmas past, the weed of Christmas present, and the weed of Christmas future. It's kind of, I think they balance it really well for the most part.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the other bits of magical realism I liked the most was this character who was basically a Grinch, somebody who really hated Christmas and basically spent Christmas Eve going out of their way to fuck with people who seemed to be having a good time. This was one of my favorite characters because they were basically a kind of prankster spirit that just went around doing crazy parkour to fuck with people. And they, whereas Mr. Green is kind of explicitly supernatural, this character was very much a human, but just like acted in a way that no human would actually act, lending towards this idea of this story being set in a kind of hyper magical New York City where sometimes things like this just happen.
I agree. Like I think the movie has fun and integrates the fact that this is all a bit ridiculous, and the fact that the same people keep showing up around town is just a bit ridiculous in a place like New York City, and it's just sort of having fun with it. Let's talk about each of the characters, three main characters, right? And I'll start with Anthony Mackie's character, Chris, I think is his name, Chris B, something like that. He has very recently become a basketball professional, because is it basketball or NFL? I thought
maybe
it's
NFL.
footy.
I'm not sure. It's some kind of sport.
He's become a sportsman.
Yes, through a combination of doping and strong influencer branding, it seems. He's just kind of built a brand for himself. So a lot of his jokes revolve around how he's just recently got a big sponsorship from Red Bull, and so he's plugging Red Bull basically every chance he gets. Which, I mean, I'm sure that's product placement for the movie, but it was so kind of... It's that kind of joke where they put it right in your face, and so you're kind of like, yeah, all right, I'll allow it, because it's funny enough that they can get away with it.
Yeah, exactly. I really liked the way they kind of immediately show us that he's been doping at the start of the film.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of waiting to see when the others will click into it, and it sort of turns out they've known the whole time.
They've known the whole time and actively avoid talking about it, which I think is a fun way for that to come out.
Yeah, and because it's sort of a recurring theme is that they're all kind of holding each other back, and then they sort of have to actually confront each other to move forward. Is something that sort of comes up towards the end. I agree. Like all the stuff with the Red Bull is hilarious. Like I love the way it's just so blatantly done. It's a form of comedy that works for me. I mean, Community did the same thing a few times. It's basically always a hit for me, kind of just embracing the hyper commercialism of some of this stuff.
Yes. Then we have Isaac, Seth Rogen's character, who is basically his wife is about to have a child. She's something like 8.5 months pregnant. Well, she's 9 months pregnant because she gives birth at the end of the film, I suppose.
Yeah.
And he is kind of struggling to be the rock that she has needed. He's been kind of playing this role of being dependable and supportive the entire time, while kind of internally freaking out a bit, but not feeling like he's able to express this. And then he just does a lot of drugs over the course of this evening, as a kind of one last night thing.
Yeah. Well, I think my favorite part about that is that it's like his wife who gives them to him, because I think it'd be so easy to set up the whole thing where it's like, he has this wife and he can't let her know how high he is or whatever. Like that would sort of be the very like bog standard way to do it. But they take a much more interesting approach, which is like, she's kind of like, this is your last night. You're about to become a father. Like here's a bunch of drugs. I want you to go out and have a wild night and come back sort of, ready to continue being such a good father. Cause she's basically thanking him for doing such a good job during the pregnancy.
Yes.
And then obviously like that part of the dynamic is so perfect when they run into each other at the midnight mass at the Catholic church, because he's Jewish and she's a Catholic, and he's just, at that point he's had so many of the drugs that she gave him that he's like
he's really lost the plot at this point.
He's just a mess, and it's a great scene that just works because for her it's also kind of her fault. Like I think that's why it works so well.
Yeah. And like, I don't know what the general perception of Seth Rogen is, but my take on him is he can be really funny sometimes, but just sometimes I feel like he doesn't put in effort. And thankfully, this is one of the movies where he does put in effort, and so it really lands. There's this one scene that I really like where he's accidentally swapped phones with another character, and he starts receiving dick pics from the presumably boyfriend of this character that ends up being James Franco. I guess not boyfriend, but like hookup or whatever.
Yeah.
And he, because of how high he is, kind of doesn't realize that these aren't meant for him, and so gets most of the way towards questioning his sexuality because of this one incident. And it's a very funny scene. It's a scene that really worked on me. And it's really stupid as well, but it just did work on me, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's a hilarious scene. Like, watching him try to grapple with the fact that he's getting sent dick pics and then being asked, like, you know, is this what you want? And him being like, wait, is it? It's so well done. And
you know what it is?
The church.
Sorry, continue.
I was gonna say the church scene stands out to me for the same reason. Like, I think just watching such a great performance of somebody kind of struggling to respond with drugs. I like the church scene as well because it's like his wife and her sister kind of struggling to deal with him as well. Like, I think both of those are just standout scenes of the movie for me.
I think the reason his character works in this film is because he has this kind of like childlike kindness while also being completely derailed. Like, something that really crystallized this for me was later on when they finally get to the party, Seth Rogen's character Isaac reunites with Mindy Kaling's character, who's the one he's accidentally swapped phones with. And they meet up with James Franco, who's the person who has been texting them. And Seth Rogen just has this like pure innocence in his reaction to how he talks to Mindy Kaling and James Franco, in that he's like very supportive of Mindy Kaling kind of hooking up with James Franco because he's seen, you know, what he has to offer, I guess. And then the scene kind of, because he's so enthusiastic, it seems like it's heading towards a threesome, and Seth Rogen's like, cool, yeah, whatever. Like, he's just very supportive, and it's a very weird scene, but I think that's why his character works. It's just because he is so supportive of people while he's high, and it just kind of works out that way.
Yeah, well, and he's not like a dropkick. Like, he's not the stoner character who has nothing going on in his life. Yes. He's arguably the one who's got his shit the most together out of the three of them.
Definitely.
And so just sort of seeing him kind of like, you know, lose himself in just having fun is kind of good to see, in a way that's not really harming anyone or anything except maybe Mindy Kaling.
Yes. So finally, the third character that rounds out the cast is Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, the main character of the film. And his arc is interesting. You kind of think that it's going to be him not being able to let go of this tradition, but he seems to be mostly okay with the fact that it's ending. A bit sad that it means that it will come to an end, but he's kind of happy for them to have one last night of it. And then you kind of learn more about his character, the fact that he has recently broken up with because he wasn't able to mature, I guess. And then this evening kind of crystallizes that for him, and he kind of realizes what he needs to do and what he wants, and it ends with him getting back together with this girl that dumped him because he wasn't able to meet her parents, which is very specific and weird, like, phobia to have, right? Is that like, they were together for, what, like 2 years, and he refused to meet her parents, which they give a reason for it, which is that he kind of doesn't want his family dynamic to be overruled, this dynamic that he has with the other two main characters. But even so, I feel like it's a bit of a weird thing for him to think.
I mean, I think it makes more sense if you consider his own relationship with him, like, well, the fact that he lost his parents. Like I think that's really what it is he's afraid of it because of that. Like, he's latched on to Isaac and Chris as his new family, and obviously that has kind of dictated his entire life in a way, the way he kind of didn't move on and has latched onto these two, and the thought of moving on and making like another new family just terrifies him. Like, I think the way it comes together at the end made it make a lot of sense for me.
Yeah, I think the ending of this plot really made it land because it kind of gave the movie this feeling that these three characters all had relatively mundane problems that they were struggling to face, and they needed this magical evening to help them kind of crystallize what they needed to do, right? And I think this lands the best with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, who, you know, goes on a real journey that involves having Miley Cyrus help him propose to this girl, and then obviously that is crazy and doesn't work. And so what ends up happening is he kind of has this down-to-earth moment the next morning, of going to talk to her and actually being like, okay, yes, this is how I feel, and like, I know that I fucked this up, but I want to try and improve myself in this way. And it's a very like adult way of having that conversation, in contrast to the magical evening that they had last night.
Yeah. Actually, I just want to talk about that. Miley Cyrus bit is some of my favorite stuff in the film. The bit where she asks them to call her Hannah is such a good way. That it gets me every time.
Yes, I think Miley Cyrus is quite good at playing like amplified versions of herself for comedy, like basically similar to what she did in Black Mirror. But she does this a fair amount, and it always seems to work for me. I think she's comfortably able to take good-natured like jabs at her character, which is good.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she seems to actually be having a ball, kind of lightheartedly taking the piss of herself a little bit, as well as getting involved with this movie. It like that positive vibe really comes across.
Yes. So I think my overall thoughts about this movie are, it's kind of the same as these types of movies, right? And it's actually the overlap between the stoner comedy kind of thing, like this movie, or like, I guess, Sausage Party, which is another one that we've both watched together, and movies like Christmas movies. They kind of overlap in the same way, where they're going to be a bit formulaic. You know that they're going to have a number of big stars doing okay performances, but kind of mediocre direction, that kind of stuff. But the fact that this is both one of these stoner comedies and a Christmas movie, I think really helps bridge the gap for that, because they're both kind of genres that are defined by mostly being just okay movies. Like, they're never going to be the best movie of all time.
Yeah, well, I think the two genres complement each other really well.
Yes, exactly.
Because they do both just sort of involve wacky adventures where you kind of learn a lesson as you go. And so, like, just seeing them mesh together, you just kind of like, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think the moments this movie worked the best was when it had that wackiness. I think it went a bit too magical at times, especially towards the end. We saw the character of Mr. Green like actually grow wings and fly away, which was like very much. Yeah, it was like it was a very like, they pushed it just a bit too far, which is very stoner comedy and not Christmas. Like, if it was Christmas, they would leave it a bit more understated. But you know, whatever.
Yeah, no, that scene is very much just meant to be a bit of a shock value joke.
Yes.
Like, just the idea that they sort of take something that's been so subtle and just like, and now he has wings and he flies off the screen. Yeah. You just sort of left a bit like, shit, okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's just kind of like, huh, all right. Like, I think that's probably that's where it went a bit too stoner comedy and a bit less Christmas, which I think were the moments that this movie felt a bit weaker, was when they leaned into the stoner comedy stuff more than the Christmassy stuff. But on the whole, the balance is pretty good, so you can't really fault it too much.
Yeah.
So the number that I'm going to give this movie, I think, is a 7 out of 10.
Okay, 7, not bad. I mean, I think that's a huge PB for the Christmas category.
Yes, for Christmas recommendations, I think this is probably the best.
I'd be very surprised if it's not. Yeah.
So that was our discussion on the night before. Now it's time to talk about what we're doing next fortnight. And actually, we have a very special guest who is here to prescribe us something. Welcome Matt Freeman from a number of Duff Media shows to the show.
Oh, thanks. Hi, everybody. Yeah, night before. Never seen it.
Well, thank you for just sitting quietly while we talked about it. But what are you here for us to...
Sounds okay.
What do you got for us?
I am bringing to you, as a prescription, the Magnus Archives, which is... I'm just going to read their sentence explanation, and then I'll give my explanation. The Magnus Archives is a weekly horror fiction anthology podcast examining what lurks in the archives of the Magnus Institute, an organization dedicated to researching the esoteric and the weird. So the Magnus Archives is a podcast. It's an audio drama. What I keep telling people, and no one has contradicted me on this, is that it starts good and then gets linearly better over time. So basically, each episode of this podcast, they're like 25 minutes long, and each of them is sort of a horror short story. But it is within the framing device of being like something from the records of this Magnus Archives. And so each of these horror short stories tends to be like from good to great. And then the framing story of like what's going on in the background of the Magnus Archives, what's going on at this institute, who are these characters and what are they doing? What are their lives like and what are their concerns? That becomes increasingly more relevant as the show goes on. Season 1 is what I'm going to prescribe to you, which is plenty good. I will say the show just gets better and better, but I'm not going to prescribe you like tens of hours of podcasts to listen to. I honestly, I think you'll just end up listening to it on your own, frankly, because I've never known anyone to stop after starting it. But the first season is a great bite-sized piece, I would say. It gets to all the stuff that's good about it, the voice acting, the characters, the stories. There's plenty of really great, like particularly great episodes in there that I'm sure you'll like. So that's my condensed sales pitch for now.
So I guess I have a question. We
Sure.
haven't done too much sort of scripted podcasting content here before. So wait, the seasons, that's very much something they're sort of setting out to do. Like, it's not just that they're hitting random points and taking a break. It's actually like there's a sense of an overarching story over a season.
Yeah, very much so. That's one of the elements that's the most frustratingly impressive about it. Is it's just so goddamn well put together. Like every season is 40 episodes exactly, and they have a clear arc. I don't want to say too much, other than the seasons are basically self-contained arcs, although they can, not self-contained because arc 2, like season 2 follows on season 1, obviously. It's but like a very satisfying, I'll say it's a satisfying conclusion. Like right now, season 4 has ended and they're basically doing all the writing and prep work for season 5. And that's going to be like a unit of storytelling, if you will. So yeah, it's very, very planned out. It's not like they just kind of rattled off a few episodes of horror short story that they had in mind. It was all put together and really, really well thought out and clever. Stuff like this, I've now sold it to a bunch of people and they've said that they like it a lot. I at the risk of overselling it, it's rapidly become one of my obsessions, honestly, in the last few weeks.
No, well, obviously, anyone who is a patron who's listening to this will be familiar with what's happened to our Discord over the last month or two as the Magnus Archives has seemingly taken over.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's basically what we talk about in the podcast channel now. Should make a separate channel for Magnus Archives.
I've got to say, as someone who was raised on 90s / 2000s TV, which was largely based on the idea of like episodic episodes, but with this overarching plot. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of excited to dive into this because that's something you don't see as much these days.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you probably wouldn't be too far wrong in even making explicit comparisons to things like the X-Files, for example. Which I don't know if you guys seen the X-Files or
yes.
Or watched?
Yeah. Yep. I think we did an episode on it a few years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously got a lot of differences. It's just like, yeah, I mean, the idea of a audio narrative or continuing like horror anthology is not a novel idea, obviously. So, but this is a very good execution of the concept.
I think something that I really like in storytelling is what it sounds like this is, where you've got arguably the main thrust is short stories, but then a kind of emergent narrative that comes out between them and around them, which definitely sounds like my jam.
Yeah, that's what makes it so nice, is that you can pretty much just listen to an episode and then you're like, God, that was a delightful morsel of storytelling. And yes, it connects to the framing story, but also you can just appreciate that one story for what it is, and like you can go on and be like, oh, I just listened to episode 26, and then people will be like, oh, that's the one with the blah 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 thing, and then like people immediately know like what you're talking about, you know. Like it's because I mean, I see that as a benefit, even when you want to talk about a show. Sometimes, like I mean, just to pull a random show out of the air, like Avatar Korra, for example. If I were to just like name an episode, you would be like, yeah, I don't really remember what else happened in that episode. But like in this show, an episode is the story. You know, it's pretty obvious what you're talking about, and that makes it easier to discuss it, which makes it, I think, more viral. It's been interesting to watch. The show has gotten a lot more popular. It's like kind of doubled in popularity in the last year, I would say, in terms of its like listeners and such. So that's good to see. Yeah, fun stuff.
I'm excited to jump on the bandwagon.
I'm glad that you described it as being so meticulously planned out, because I remember, man, a few years ago I tried to get into the podcast Welcome to Night Vale, which sounds like it shares some, at least surface level similarities, where it's kind of an interesting setting and it's telling little self-contained bits. But the thing I really hated about Welcome to Night Vale was, for 30 or 40 episodes that I listened to it, I felt like there was more that was developing, but it never really developed, and it ended up just burning me out of the show, because I was kind of like, there's so many cool elements here and they never come together.
I had the same exact experience with Night Vale, where I was like, oh, this is fun. Okay, it's interesting. Where are we going with this?
Yeah, it's a fun setup. Let's see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good that you brought that up, because like one thing that I will say all the time about storytelling is you'll forgive a lot of sins if the characters are good, and the recurring characters of the Magnus Archives are great. They're freaking fantastic, and I think the show is great aside from that. But that is one of the things that makes it just kind of hold together really well. I feel like in Welcome to Night Vale, there just weren't characters. There was like the one guy who does the voice, and then a whole bunch of crazy crap in the background. But this show has great characters and great storylines for those characters, and that's probably one of my favorite things about it. Actually, that's it's funny. I don't feel like this is a spoiler. I feel like I'm just kind of doing you a favor by saying, don't be like me and like kind of just not pay attention to the framing story toward the beginning, because like obviously they're introducing the important characters who you're going to be caring about for many more episodes. So don't ignore them.
Yeah,
like I didn't really get that that's what it was at first. So I didn't get that they were going to be recurring and important. So I just didn't pay much attention. It's not really a spoiler to say, like that's kind of just the way the show works.
I feel like a comparison that I'm begging to make is, have you read many SCP stories, Matt?
I've read a ton of them, yeah.
What's the comparison like here? Because framing it as an institute where they research the paranormal and these are kind of case files from that immediately makes SCP stories jump into my head, although those are self-contained for the most part.
Yeah, I don't want to answer in too much detail because of spoilers, of course. Sure. But I kind of have to believe that there is some kind of influence or inspiration. I think I'm going to refrain from like there's all kinds of similarities and all kinds of differences, but sure. I think it'll be more fun for you if you uncover what exactly is going on as you go. So
as long as there's a sacrifice of Class D personnel, I'm in for it.
So the other comparison, and I'm probably the only person, I don't know why I'm saying this because nobody else has seen it. There was a sci-fi show called Warehouse 13, which was sort of a similar premise. There's this institute that basically, it was inspired by, how at the end of the first Indiana Jones movie, they put the Ark in a warehouse.
Right.
So this is basically a show saying who are the people who put all these magical artifacts in warehouses. Mm-hmm. And it was a show on sci-fi, so it never really landed very well. So I'm kind of excited to see what it seems to me is going to be a bit more of a mature take on the idea. Like Warehouse 13 was very campy, which is why it never really landed.
Sure, yeah, I guess you could call it like it takes the premise seriously, I suppose you could say.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. I'm struggling. I'm struggling with the spoilers.
Sounds like we should start to wind it up, and then we'll dive more, more wholeheartedly into these conversations.
Yeah, I guess I'll just wrap up with like, I really wish I could just prescribe the whole show, because if we could talk about the whole show when I come back, then there'd just be so much more to talk about. But as it is, it's like the first season, there's going to be plenty to talk about. There's a few reveals that we won't get to talk about, but I'm sure you'll just end up watching it later, and then we can talk about it in the Discord.
Yeah, well, and there's a few things that we come back to quite we come back to fairly solidly in like our annual prescriptions, and maybe if by that point we're all caught up, we'll just have to bring you in for a bit of that.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Is it season 1 where it's revealed that the Magnus Archives itself is named after the character from the Adventure Zone, or is that like season 2, season 3 kind of thing?
I think that's that's patron only content.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I'm very excited to dive into this show.
Me too.
The fact that there's so many things you want to talk about but can't is often a good sign for us that we'll really enjoy something.
Yeah, or maybe you'll hate it, and that would be interesting too.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll dive into it over the next fortnight, get through season 1, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Sounds good.
So yeah, I guess we'll be back in a fortnight to talk more about the Magnus Archives. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode of MediaMD. If you want to leave us your thoughts on the Magnus Archives, the best place to do that is our Twitter, I suppose. You can tweet us at mediamdpodcast.
Yes, you can also reach out to us by leaving a comment on iTunes, because we read those, and it's a weird way to start a discussion, but we'll take it if you give us 5 stars. We're also accessible via doofmedia.com. That's the Doofmedia website. You can find out a bit about us there. You can find out even more about Matt there, who you just heard.
Mm-hmm. You can also email us at mediamdpodcast@gmail.com.
God, I can't believe I put iTunes review before email.
Yeah.
That's embarrassing.
Look, we're fiendishly checking those iTunes reviews.
Yes, that was on purpose.
If you want to support the Doof Media Network, you can go to patreon.com/doofmedia and support this show, Deep Impact, our other show, and all the other great shows on the Doof Media Network. And also, you get a few extra little bonus Christmassy presents. We got all kinds of cool Christmas things. We got a bunch of articles related to Christmas movies, which we've all written, which is fun. And you get all kinds of nice perks depending on the level that you back us at.
Yeah, so head on over to patreon.com to see what those perks are. But there's so much cool extra content that's available to the patrons, so please check it out. Yes,
I guess that's it. For more information on this show, head over to the home of Doof Media, doofmedia.com. You can find all the things we just mentioned, as well as all of the previous clues for the Media MD ARG, where you can help us figure out just who is Dr. MD and why is his proposal so unexpected. Elliot, why don't you tell the listeners this fortnight's clue?
Lightning.
And we'll see you next fortnight.